That's it for the music. Welcome, everybody. We are live. We are here for all things Fantasy Grounds on Sunday night. We do this every Sunday and Tuesday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. Let me switch the screen over to nothing, just Fantasy Grounds. There it is. Oh, no. We don't want that. We don't want me. We want just the, well, yeah, this is what we want right here. I'm freaking out. Okay, so with me tonight, guys, is my co-host Leroon and from Fantasy Grounds College, and also we have special guest Furied Fate, who will be with us for this evening's show, which is Don'ts and Do's for Fantasy Grounds. What's up, guys?
What's up?
Hey,
Um, Leroon, why don't you introduce yourself and tell everybody what you're all about, and then we'll have Furied Fate do the same.
All right, so I am the founder of Fantasy Grounds College. I'm known as Leroon on the server. I like to help people get the community together, create things, make things happen. We've got a lot of good things, a lot of positive things have been happening the last couple months. And as a matter of fact, Fury was one of my first players in the group, and also she was the first Patreon for FGC. So I give the floor to her.
Oh, very nice. First Patreon. Yes, Furied Fate,
wow.
welcome to the show. Tell us about yourself.
Hey guys, I'm a gamer who's been, I guess, playing Dungeons and Dragons for the better part of a decade, maybe a little bit longer. And since I've always had problems finding, actual live games with other people, I started to turn to Fantasy Grounds. And, since I started playing with Leroon and he kind of showed me the ropes of how to play, I've actually been quite active in playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the show. Glad to have you tonight. And ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be discussing the don'ts and do's. Just before the show, it was going to be do's and don'ts, but we changed it to don'ts and do's because Leroon's very clever and he said we should do that. So I said, yeah, that's a good idea. So it's the don'ts and do's for Fantasy Grounds. You will see as you watch the stream, or if you're watching this on YouTube later, you'll see my screen bounce back and forth because we do have notes that we're going to refer to. So let's just jump right in. If you guys have questions during the show, go ahead and post them in the chat. Normally we do questions after the show, but I think today we might get to them as we go. So hopefully we'll try to do these because if you guys have suggestions for don'ts and do's for your Fantasy Grounds games, then you can let us know as well. Um, First one on the list is hotkey double click. So let me set this up by opening a character and hotkeying initiative. So for those that don't know, you can drag any clickable thing in all of Fantasy Grounds. You can drag it down and put it in one of these hotkeys. So I'm going to put that there. So now when you roll initiative, normally on the character sheet here, you would double click. You double click, it rolls initiative. If you single click, it doesn't do anything. But your DMs and other players will thank you for training yourself not to double click hotkeys. Because when you go down here, I click on initiative once and it rolls it. Now if I click on it twice and double click it like I'm used to, it's going to roll initiative twice. There's going to be a huge argument about what your initiative is and everything. Oh, I don't have totals on for some reason. Let me turn on totals. Show totals. That was from last week's show. Anyway, so that's one tip. Is to if you set any hotkeys, don't double click them because you're going to annoy people if you do it, and information in the chat window will be wrong. And I don't know, anything else to say about that, guys?
Yeah, so in the lessons, we teach the players about that particular locating dice rolls, but we don't cover that. So double clicking may be something I'm going to add to my curriculum.
Okay, cool. Yeah, especially if you had like I usually as a player, I'll melee. I'll put my melee attacks down as hotkeys, and if I were to double click that, I'm going to roll 2 attacks, and that happens all the time in games. And I'm always telling my players, oh, they go, I don't know why it came in there twice, and I'm like, well, did you hotkey it and double click it? And they're like, oh yeah, well that's why. So that is a don't, I guess, for our first one. All right, next one is token placement on the map. So Leroon, why don't you speak to that?
All right. So one of the biggest things that I struggled with as a first time DM and a player when I first opened Fantasy Grounds was the understanding of how the game works and why it works and things like that. And so now we should know by now, if you've been using it for a while, that you would drag a NPC from the NPC section to the combat tracker, and then from the combat tracker to the map. What the people tend to do in the beginning is they will drag the token straight to the map without being on the combat tracker, and that holds true for NPCs and players. So if you want your automation and your combat tracker to work correctly, that is something that you don't do. You do not just drag them straight from the character selection window or the NPC window straight to the map. It has to go in the combat tracker first.
So you can see the differences here. As he was explaining that, I was doing it. So because I'm GM, I don't have any tokens up here, but dragging the token from here inside the character selection window is the same as dragging it from up here. So sometimes when you look at the map, you see this token here, my little blue Rob Tui thing, doesn't have a green border around it. It doesn't have any markings on it. So it's not an active token. It's just a picture. Whereas if I drug it from the character's name's Lazy Stunner, that's funny. If I drug it from the combat tracker, then it's got the green bar around it. Same thing with the NPC. You saw me load the Aarakocra in. I opened the stat block and drug just the token picture onto the map, which is this one. But the active token is the red with the green dot. That's from the combat tracker. So the thing not to do is don't drag anything to the map that isn't from the combat tracker. And if you end up having tokens on the map that don't look right, that's probably what happened.
Yeah, I that was a mistake that I made quite often in the very beginning. I had no idea that it was linked.
Cool. All right.
Well, another thing about tokens on the maps, I always prefer them to be actually in grid squares instead of on the lines.
Ah, very good. Yes. Oh, we didn't even think about that one. I can't believe it.
And I mean, it's
Yes.
not like it's a
It's
huge thing, but
definitely,
it's
yeah,
kind of a nice thing to do.
it's nice, it's courteous, but it's also important when you're deciding range and movement and everything else.
An area of
So
effect. Yeah.
you'll see that when you move your token, you should try to end the movement in a center of a square, so that when you finish the movement, you're not, on some different, like, what square are you in there? I mean, if you can see it, that's 4 squares. He might be half and half like this. You should always be in a specific square rather than being on a line. Now, the other thing I tell GMs especially is if you are dealing with a large creature, then it's obviously going to take 4 squares, and the same would apply to bigger creatures that take 9 and 16 and so forth. But when you move the large creature, you do want to end up in a intersection so that the token ends up where it's supposed to be. And what your tendency to want to do is to move it like you do a regular size one and put it in the center of a square. But if you do that, you'll see that when it gets there, it's all messed up. It's all jacked up. Which one of these 9 squares are you in? Well, I really meant to be in these 4 here like that. So just, yeah, as Fury said, that's very courteous to do, but it's also important for measuring range and distance and every kind of other thing you might be doing on the map.
There's one other issue I just thought of. Is those trees right there, the natural barriers.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had players and DMs go right through those barriers, especially if it's like a stone wall or something crazy like that. I'm not sure if that bothers you, but it bothers me for movement's sake because it changes the movement rate.
Oh yeah, you do want to draw your path. So like, say for example, let's say I'm here and I want to end up right there. Rather than doing this, rather than just drawing a straight line, what I should be doing is I should be drawing like this, maybe over here, kind of like that, whatever it is. But you draw your path, and the reason you do that is number one, you're not going to go through. Well, I guess you might be able to go through trees, but just as an example here, you don't want to go through walls or anything solid. And also, DM can, like, say for example, there was
A
let's
trap
just, yeah, exactly. Say
or
there was a
difficult terrain,
exactly. So if that was there, like in these squares here, I would have just walked through that and set it off and whatnot. Whereas if you draw just a straight line, whoops, if you just draw a straight line to your path, that's kind of cheating. So that's more of a personal preference that your GM would have you do. But as a player, if you're a courteous player, you will draw your path and not cheat and say, oh, I'm just going to go through this wall. And I've even said that to players, like they'll draw a straight line and I'm like, oh, so what power do you have? I'm sarcastic. What power is it that you have that allows you to phase through walls? I'm not sure what that power is.
speedster. I just vibrate and go through the walls.
Yeah, I'm the Flash, right? We're playing Marvel superheroes, even though Flash is DC. I fucked up.
Copyright infringement.
Yeah, copyright. So that's a good. Thank you for bringing that up. That's a good point. And by the way, we are going to do a show that's just maps in the future. So we will cover all that stuff extensively. But just as more of a do or don't, definitely that's a good thing to bring up. Next thing is leveling. So leveling, you can get messed up fast if you do it wrong. So this character here is a wizard. So most people's tendency when they want to level the wizard is to go to the library, open up the source book, go to classes, find the wizard, and drag it over and drop it. Now you can do that. The reason that we suggest you don't do that is because very often someone is going to have a lot of different sources. So as a matter of fact, let me open up all the sources here and show you what I mean. Because if you drag a source from a different source book than you originally built the character with, it's going to screw it up, and it'll put like, oh, you know what? Let's even do that. I'll show you an example of what I'm talking about. I'll screw it up on purpose. So let's say that I built this. I'm pretty sure I built this wizard with the PHB. I did. Okay. So this wizard was built from the player's handbook, but now I'm going to try to bring in the wizard class from Xanathar's. So if you go down, you're going to see like there's 1, 2, 3, 4 different types of wizards. The Sword Coast Adventurer's one, Player's Handbook, Xanathar's Guide. So if I bring, oh Christ, it didn't do what I wanted it to do. Damn it. Well, anyway, that's not to say that I think some classes will do that, but I guess Wizard doesn't. But the whole point of that is you don't want to level up that way. The way you want to level up is to open your class and level with the magnifying glass here and get to this box. And the way to properly level is whatever class you are, just take this shield, drag it over and drop it right there and level up that way. That way you know you're not mixing any classes from, within the library, you're not screwing anything up. The only exception to that would be if you're going to multi-class, you obviously can't multi-class because you're not a rogue here. So if I wanted to go rogue, I would then, open up the classes and find rogue and bring it over and do that, right? And but then in the future, when I leveled up, if I wanted to level rogue, I would drag that. If I wanted to level wizard, I would drag that. So the point is to level your characters from within the class and level window and try not to use the actual sources, because if you mix them, and I wish that wizard would have, usually what would happen, it would be wizard 7 and then wizard 1, and even though it's supposed to be wizard 8, it would split them, and now you got to basically recreate your character. You're totally screwed. So that's just kind of a best practice on how to level. Did you guys want to say anything about that?
Yep. One comment was, I believe, I could be wrong, don't quote me on this, but I believe that the official products have been worked on so that would alleviate some of that.
Oh,
Not
that's good.
possible.
That's probably why that worked, because last time I
However,
did that, I'll bet it doesn't work on all of them though.
right, and if you buy a third-party product that does, has its own custom classes and things, then that may not work correctly.
Correct.
So,
So let's go to let's open up something from the DM's Guild here that has archetypes, and let's try that.
okay.
So let's see, where's classes? Okay, so if I try to take the wizard from Volo's racial archetypes, that's an archetypes thing on the DM's Guild that I converted for the guy. Now, if I bring wizard over, I bet it doesn't work.
It may not.
Ah, crap! It did. Maybe they
All
fixed
right.
that. So it's unfortunate for us during tonight's show that happened to work. But just as a best practice, you do want to try to do it the way we say, because then you're not going to have any issues. You're always going to get whatever wizard or whatever rogue you want or whatever your class is there. All of a sudden, this guy's going to be level 20 in a second if I don't stop. So yeah, good. So I'm almost disappointed that it works now, because of course you want it to work, but the problem is I just mixed a wizard from the other source and gave myself all kinds of craziness. Now, if we're not going to take time to go through it, but I gave myself powers I shouldn't be able to have here. Uh,
Right.
because once you do a class, you're supposed to stick on that path. Um, but anyway,
So along those lines, when you're creating a character, once you've made those choices by dragging over, you can't go back. There's no undo button.
right, you have to. I mean, you could, if you knew what you were doing, you could go in here and clear all this stuff out. But if you try to do it that way and you try to try to go back and clean up what you did, you're going to end up, just unless you completely wipe it out, you're going to screw yourself up. So the best thing to do is just open up another one, start over, get another guy going, and then say goodbye to this guy and just delete him. I'm not going to do it, but just delete him. That's the best thing you can do.
Okay.
But that's a whole character creation thing. All right. What else? What's the next one? Opening a bunch of stuff at once. Books and tokens. Okay. So, Leroon, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So as a new DM or even a new player, you're all excited. You bought all these books and you got all this stuff, and you're like, yes, because that's what I did. I bought a whole ton of tokens and books and maps and everything else. So in my excitement, I went through all those things and opened every single thing up and looked at it to see what I got. Well, lo and behold, after about 10 of those books and couple dozen tokens, I noticed that Fantasy Grounds was kicking out a lot of errors. And so, quite often, you'll see a scripting error or some kind of strange memory issue. And what's actually happening is that Fantasy Grounds will only address up to 3.5 to 4 gigs of virtual memory at a time. So, you can have the biggest, baddest computer, it will not really help that much because Fantasy Grounds can only work in a 4 gig box. So if you fill that 4 gigs up with images and tokens and books and people connecting and everything else, it's going to run out of memory quick and it's going to start causing those errors. So what I'm trying to say is less is more. So don't open up a ton of books at the same time. What you can do though is you can unload the things that you're done looking at or unshare them. And that's something I think we should probably post as a do.
Yeah. So I just opened up a massive amount of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and I do have I have a pretty darn good brand new computer, so it opened it all pretty quick. But you
Mm-hmm.
look at all this stuff. I just wanted to show an example of it's possible to open like every module you own and have it be in there. There's all the Rob Tui stuff, and but yeah, it will cause you problems. And so you can go right here to modules in the library, and it'll open all the modules. You can click on the all button here, and it'll go over to loaded. Now this will show you only the modules you have loaded, and if you're ready, you can just start nerfing stuff out. Just start unloading stuff, and
Right.
pretty quickly you'll get down to only what you want to keep open. So I close this. I don't need it. Close it. And I mean, I don't want to spend a lot of time, and we'll move on, but I'll just keep doing this. But just to show you, you can both in the library data module activation and also in the tokens one. If you go to modules and tokens, you see I have all these tokens loaded now too. So you can unload all these tokens, and it does take a second or two for each one to unload or load if you're doing the reverse. And the bigger ones, of course, the modules and the DMG, you click on that one, it takes like 5 seconds. But yeah, anything that you don't need, you can just unload, and that'll speed everything up. So if you're having problems, normally what I do is when I start a campaign or start a game, I go open up like the player's handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, the Monster Manual, and the adventure that I'm playing, and then that's it. I don't open anything else, and then I just open stuff as needed.
Right. And so something that kind of segues from that is that when you're sharing images or tokens or anything like that, you're running into crashing your player's session too.
Right.
So it is.
So yeah. So that was a Fantasy Grounds Friday's tip that I just posted the other day. Is that there's only one map shared here, but normally when you play a campaign and you go for weeks and weeks and months, you're shared. Here's all of the maps, but here's just the shared ones, and it'll put a little P with a circle there. There'll be there'll be pages and pages of those because every time you share an image, like if I go here and I open up this Aarakocra image and I share it, now when I go back to the shared, there's the P right there, right? So now there's two things shared, and it just builds and builds. And so what you can do is if you're running into map memory errors or anything, you can just come right over here to images and maps, go down here, click on the button so it says shared. It'll show you all the circle P's. Then you can just click on this P and circle it, and I basically just unshared those two things. And you can unshare everything that you don't need to share, and that'll free up some memory and make your game run smoother.
Yeah. So my tendency was to open everything while I'm creating stuff.
Yeah.
And I actually did that very thing. I had so much stuff going on that I actually lost a whole month's worth of work.
Oh man.
So, because I didn't know how to recover, and we may go into we're going to have a show about how to recover from a database corruption.
Oh, we are? Good. I love it.
Yeah.
I'm excited. All right. Anything you wanted to say, Fury, about that at all?
No, actually, Laren kind of covered it. The whole thing about how players will easily crash if they're trying to load modules and you're trying to load a map, and the map is just like taking up so much time and space. Not to mention that does lag your game time. So if you want to spend more time actually going along with the story instead of like I'm going to wait 5 hours for this wonderful image to load.
Yeah,
So.
exactly.
Not
Okay,
that
cool.
us players don't appreciate the pretty graphics, the detailed maps. It's like I really would prefer the story.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, so the next one is logging on to a table as a player. And I think I'll bring up another instance of Fantasy Grounds here alongside. And you want to always log into the table that you're going to be joining with the same login idea. So let's say I'm joining Leyrune's table, and let's say I am Furied Fate. So that's a typical way that I would log on. Is I would say I would put a thing, where am I logging on and who am I, and then you're going to put in Cold One, Penis Frenzy, whatever the I just made that up. Whatever the login is, you put there. So then you'll start game, and obviously it's not going to work for me because there's no such table. But you always want to put, I mean, you don't have to do this, but a best practice is put your name, put the table you're logging into or the game that you're playing, and then dash your name. And that way, when it saves your logins, you'll be able to go down through there'll be a big list of logins here. And you'll be able to say, oh, that was Leyrune's table, that was Rob's table, that was Fury's table. And then what this does is when you log on, it allows you to match up to any characters that you have in the character selection window from before. So like you see that where it says owned by Lazy Stooner, owned by FGC Leyrune. So that matches their login when they log into the table. So If, for example, you had to reinstall Fantasy Grounds, or like me, you got a new PC, or whatever the case might be, and you don't have your logins, and you go sign in under a different login onto someone's table that you've been on before, your characters will not show up in the character PC window. And then you'll have to say to the DM, hey, my characters aren't there. And then they're going to say, well, did you log on with the same thing? And then you'll say, I don't know. And then they'll say, let me release it. And then they have to go here and release the character like that. And so it's just it's not that big of a deal, but it's just a best practice to log on to each table the same way each time so that A, you can keep track of your tables, and B, you don't have to mess with any character claiming, the times you come back after the first time. Did that seem clear enough, you guys? Did I explain that right?
Yeah.
All right,
Um,
cool.
can we mention that I think there was a prize or something like that someday?
Oh, well, you might be right. We are going to give a prize away at the end of the show, or toward the end of the show,
Okay.
sometime. And that prize that we're going to give away will be the very first module that I ever did in uh, Fantasy Ground. Sorry, not Fantasy Grounds, but the very first thing I ever put on the DM's Guild. And when we do the raffle for the prize, I'll bring it up and I'll show it everybody. So while there's like a 5-minute countdown on the raffle, I'll show everybody what it is, and then people can enter it if they want to win it.
Ooh, fancy.
Fancy.
All right.
All right, next one is, what is the next one? Oh, spell languages, and as Leroon said before the show, spell anything correctly. So when you have languages on your sheet, this one has Orc, and this one has Common, Draconic, Gnomish, and Orc. You have to make sure that you spell those languages correctly. If you don't, it won't work with the language chat down here where all the languages are. And if you don't know how to spell one, as a DM, you can have the list of everything. Now, as a player, you're only going to have this list of what's on your sheet. But common mistakes people make is they say orcish instead of orc, or they say, go
I
ahead.
say elven all the time.
Yeah, elven instead of what it should be, which is elvish. So if you're ever not sure, you can look it up in the player's handbook, and however they have it in the player's handbook is how you should have it here on your sheet. And if I have the player's handbook open, do I? I don't know. But because I went and closed a bunch of stuff. I'm trying to see, yeah, I didn't have it open. I think in the reference manual of the player's handbook, they list the languages.
All of them. I think there's some that they don't list.
Yeah, so they're all here. So you can learn how to spell like orc. Instead of orcish, it's orc. It's not elvish, or I mean, it's not elven, it's elvish. So you can go look those up and see how to spell them. And they're all there. So just make sure and spell those right. That's a pretty straightforward tip.
I think that's a cool thing. You just gave me an idea for my curriculum, and maybe even a hashtag DM's Guild
All
is
right.
to actually have that as a module or a list.
Oh, have the ooh, oh my god!
Uh-oh.
I'm gonna have to do that tonight, in 30 minutes after the show. I'll have it done up on DM's Guild by the end of the night. Bam.
Bam.
No, I'm not gonna. If you want to do it, you can do it. So the next tip, which I've already forgotten because I have a memory of a goldfish, it lasts like 3 seconds, and then I've already forgot. It was DMs be wary of unidentified items in the party sheet. So this happens a lot to people. If you have identification on and you have an item that is unidentified, as a GM, you will see that you won't know the difference, whether it's identified or unidentified. It's going to look the same to you as a GM. Players, however, will see only the word shield, and if they click on it, they're only going to see the symbol of the eyes emblazoned with the shield. That's it. They won't see any of this other stuff. Now the problem comes is if you divvy out, or if a player takes something to their inventory from the party sheet and it is not identified, it is going to say, there it is, unidentified item. They're going to click on it, and all they're going to see is that, whoops, I clicked on the wrong one. No, why is that happening? That's weird.
You got more than one?
Yeah, but I'm clicking on the unidentified item.
Click on
And
the
it's
one above it.
well, but I'm yeah, but do you see what's happening?
Two of them. Yeah, there's two of them.
I've seen that happen
Oh,
before too.
yeah,
Oh,
that's weird.
It's one
That's
of those
broken.
weird kind of broken glitches.
oh, actually, no, there wasn't a glitch. The glitch was me. There was an unarmed strike on there, and then there was an unarmed strike unidentified, and the shield is what I'm looking for. So shield. So it's not identified. I don't know why the person should be. Oh, maybe it's because I'm DM. Yeah. Oh, okay. I should have done that. I should have done that better. I'm going to connect as a player and show what that looks like.
Real quick from the chat from the stream, Farid, I hope I said that right. I want to say Pharrell, but Farid was talking about, talking about the cogwheel for the options in that top right corner. He says from there you can actually see a list of languages. There's a language tab.
Oh yeah, and we did cover that. Oh, and the players maybe can see that. Maybe the players can see that as well. Well, I'll find out right now. That is a good tip, Farid, if that is true.
Yep.
So here I'm connected as a player. Can I see that?
Yeah.
Oh snap! There
That's
they all are.
amazing.
That's amazing. Don't have to look it up in the player's handbook. Awesome. All right,
We all
so
learned something new.
that's right. I learned something. So now here I'm connected as a player, and I go to my inventory, and I'll open the party sheet. Now see, I just oh yeah, I took it out. Oh, that doesn't help. So the shield on my party sheet is probably the wrong character, didn't I? Is it the blue one? Yeah, maybe if I just learn the program here. All right, let me try that again. So on this inventory, so the unidentified item is shield. Now if I open this, all I see is shield and this. And as a player, I can't identify it. But if I go back to DM,
Right.
and identify it, now when I come back here, it's all identified. Everything's all there. So I didn't mean to confuse people there by switching back and forth, but player view, the important thing to remember, that the thing that we were trying to convey is that before you divvy anything out of the players, out of the party sheet, or let players take them, because players can drag stuff out of there onto their sheets themselves, but make sure stuff's identified, because if it's not, they either have to put it back in the sheet, you have to identify it and then redrag it, or you have to hunt down out of the 12 players in your game, you have to hunt down which it is, go find it on the sheet, and then like that. So
we lost you, Rob.
Uh-oh, you lost me?
The shift button.
No, I was holding it down. I don't know what happened. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, well the stream heard me, because whether I hold shift down or not, they hear me. All right, so that covers that. What's the next one? The next one is don't make Okay, this is just a little, this is more of a courtesy thing. People do this a lot because they think it's funny. But what you'll have people do, and it just annoys everyone else but the person doing it, is they'll go to the dice and they'll make the dice black, and then they'll make the text black, and then they'll throw dice, and then nobody can tell what, the number comes up at the bottom. But it's just really super annoying when you roll a bunch of dice that are all black, or the other way to do it is to do it all white. And if you get creative, you can even make your dice any color you want and then change it to where you can't see the numbers, and then roll a dice in there like that. So that is a don't do that.
Don't
That's
do that.
just, and if that's nothing else but me saying that to the general public, just don't do that.
Please don't do that. I've
Please
had
don't.
students do that too.
This one doesn't really have a graphic to go with it, and we will cover this more in depth. But especially, I think not only when you're using Fantasy Grounds, but when you are using any role-playing game or any online thing, it's very courteous to use push to talk. Don't be the person who is on voice activation and we can hear your spouse and your children and your dogs and your pet bird and your snake that hisses too loudly when it wraps around your neck to hiss into your microphone, and you crunching on your food and whatever else it might be.
Really, a snake?
Yeah.
Has that happened?
No, it hasn't happened. I'm
I
just
just thought
trying to
that'd
get
be
crazy.
I thought that'd be really cool. Like, I don't know if I would not want to hear that. I mean, and plus it would be a nice way for everybody to know that you're being strangled to death by a python.
Right. Also, if you do have a snake that's coiling around your neck, just push to talk, and then we'll hear it. That's fine. So that's just kind of and then we are going to have a whole show in the future about Discord. As a matter of fact, Fury will be here for that show because Leyrune will not, and
Okay.
that's coming up. We'll get to that on the schedule. Let's see. Next tip is. Oh, Leyrune, I'm going to have you cover this one. Try to adhere to the format when posting an LFG on the forums.
Okay, so this is kind of a thing that I've noticed over the months that I've been involved with Fantasy Grounds, and this really confused me. And it also, I'm a a perpetrator of this. So even in the college, when you're posting for a game or a class, or even on the Fantasy Grounds forums, when you go there, there's a certain format that you want to try to follow or adhere to. Now, there's good examples of it on the forums itself. So when you go to that section, you will see a bunch of games posted there. And this particular one is for the college, and it's not done very well because it's not really a game, it's more or less a teaching. But if you go to one of the ones that are actual games that are coming up in the future, um, there's looking for DM for players. They post the what they're looking for, the day of the week, the time zone, the game system, so on and so forth. I've seen a lot of bad examples to where you'll have a guy that comes on there and responds to that and says, "Hey, I want to play." And that's it.
Yeah.
There's no information. There's nothing. There's or you'll have a posting that's the same incomplete way. It'll say looking for player, but it doesn't actually tell you what game system it is. It's half complete. So make sure you know what the game system is, the time of day, the time zone, and try to get into the habit of including a UTC zone because not everybody uses the standard United States format.
Right. So here's the
So,
template, and it's on the forums. If you go to, and you can use this template even if you're posting in someone's Discord or at the FGC or wherever you're doing it. But if you go to the forum under Game Organization, LFG, and then click on the template for players, you can basically highlight this and just cut and paste it into your own posting, and then just change the information. And the more complete you can be, like if you just post, hey, I'm going to be running Lost Mine of Phandelvers on Wednesdays, bam, that's it. That's all. You're going to get 85 Yahoos contacting you, and they're going to have all kinds of questions. So basically, what you want to do is you want to answer as many questions as you can. Tell them what day it is. What are you using Discord? Are you, uh, do you have the FG license? Do they need a license? What your time zone is, all that stuff. And you just go down through this template, and then a little bit about yourself and what your game is going to be. I don't see it in here, but a lot of people use. They'll also include something like, as a DM, my role play to combat ratio is 50-50, or 70-30, or in my case, combat to role playing is 99-1. It's not really, but I'm way more of a mechanics guy, and all the players that play with me know that. But yeah, that gives a good indication of what you're looking for in players. And then if you're a player that's looking for a game, you can also do the information and just make sure that you're saying that you're not running a game, but that you're looking to play a game, and give a little bit of information. You wouldn't have to be as involved as this. You obviously wouldn't have to put as much information, but you can give as much about yourself as you can to let other players of Fantasy Grounds um, know what's up. Because one of the biggest things I hear, especially now that I'm on the social media team and stuff, is I hear, oh, there's not enough games. And I'm like, are you crazy? Like, there's like a million, there's literally like a million games. All you have to do is find it. So this is one good way to find other players. And like, for example, there's the Fantasy Grounds forums. If you go to the Fantasy Grounds College, they have, I've bugged Leyrune about this before. Theirs is not labeled LFG. It's labeled Game Planner for DMs read only. So DMs can
yep.
go there and put there, but you see it's the same basic format. They're telling you what the license is, what time it is, what day it is, how long the session is, all that stuff. Here's the role play combat mix 50-50 right there.
Nice.
So yeah, that's a good tip just to remember if you want to try to find games. That's how to do it.
And I think the issue is less DMs and not so much less games.
Right. There's millions of games. There's not that many DMs. So if you want to have a game guaranteed, just be a DM. You'll have no shortage of people knocking down your door. Trust me.
We're trying to teach that too in the college, by the way.
Awesome.
A little bit.
Okay. Oh, here's the next one. Mark yourself prone and other conditions for your DM. Be a nice player. So a lot of players don't even know they can do this, but if you open the conditions, and let's say that in the combat tracker you've been knocked prone, but the for whatever reason the DM doesn't have the thing on the monster to mark you prone. If he says you're prone, you yourself can come here, drag over prone, and make yourself prone. You can make yourself unconscious. You can make yourself anything actually. And then as a player, if you've applied effects to yourself, you can also remove those. So that's just a courteous thing. If you're able to help your DM by marking yourself with a condition that he or she can't or hasn't gotten to yet, just make sure that you tell them you're doing it. Hey DM, I'm going to mark myself prone so you don't have to. Oh, thanks very much. That kind of a thing. So that's just a little tip there. That's a do.
Another one, or here's a don't, to not, I guess, put too many conditions on you or double the conditions.
Right.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
are you
Sometimes
actually keeping track of your own conditions as status effects or racial effects?
Right. So sometimes if you're doing that to help your DM, but you're not communicating to the DM that you're doing it, you might apply curse to yourself, and then the DM might apply curse, and now you've got cursed on there twice. So you want to definitely make sure that communications stay open, because helping your DM by applying your own conditions can really save them time. But if you do it and they do it as well, all you're doing is just adding more difficulty to the game. So you definitely want to have, and usually as a practice, what I do as DM myself is I tell players, hey, please apply prone to yourself, and then they, I just make sure they all know how to go do that. But now if your DM asks you, some DMs might not want you to even mess with that. They might want to do everything all themselves if they're giant, huge control freaks, which is fine if that's how they DM. But if they ask you to do it, now you can do it and you know how to do it. And a lot of players just didn't know they could apply effects to themselves.
Take effects off of themselves too.
And take them off. Yeah, that's a new thing as of like 2 versions ago. If you click on this little flying bird, has anybody ever figured out what this is?
It's a wing boot.
Yeah,
A winged boot. Okay.
Doesn't make any sense to me.
So let me show you this. Conditions. I'm gonna apply a couple to prone and frightened. Okay, so let me go back to player. So on player, if you click this little winged boot, if that's what we're saying, any effects that you've applied to yourself, you can remove. So like I applied prone and this, but you see these prone and frightened, the DM applied to me, so I can't remove those because those were applied by the DM. So that's how you know if there's something on you that you can't take off, it's because you were given it by the DM. That's why.
Okay.
All right. Advancing turns. So this is also just again a best practice in the game. The advancing of turns should always be done by the player. The DM can do it, but I suggest, this is only like I guess it's personal taste, but if each player passes their own turn, they stay more engaged, especially if they don't, who knows what turn it is and all that stuff. So if they pass their turn, it's just a better way to keep the game going smoothly, and each player can pass their own turn. The DM can pass everybody's turn. The only exception to where a player wouldn't pass their turn is if they're controlling an NPC block. Like say they're in control of a bugbear that's in the combat tracker, but it's an NPC block, not a character sheet. They can't pass the turn. So they can do all the actions, but they can't pass the turn. So then they would just say, DM, that turn is done, please pass the turn. It sounded to me like I stumbled over all that. Was that confusing at all, you guys?
I understood it only because I'm a victim and a perpetrator of that. So I try to click the advanced turn and then the player does it and it ends up skipping another player because of that.
Right. So if you don't have an established protocol basically for your games and players and DMs try to click the turn at the same time. This also happens a lot with death saves. A player's not necessarily that involved because they're like, ah, crap, I'm unconscious. I'm just sitting here watching. And whether you have death saves on automatic or not, the DM sometimes will get jumpy and the death save will get rolled. The DM will, because he knows that's all that's going to, unless the person gets a 20, that turn is over, and the DM will want to quickly move to the next thing and click it. But if the player also clicks it, it's going to get clicked twice, and it's going to skip somebody in the combat tracker. It happens all the time. So if you establish a kind of a rule at your table that players always pass their own turns, they ask the DM to pass it if it's a player controlled NPC, and then the DM passes for all the monsters, then you should never have any trouble. Next one is design your campaigns in the story entries rather than the notes, and I think Leroon can probably talk to that.
All right. So if you're designing your own campaign and you want to save it at a later point, um, I would recommend that you actually use the story entries as opposed to the notes. Now, if you're just going to run out of your notes, that's fine. This is more of a preferential thing for designing. But if you want to export and turn this work of art that you've done into a module, you probably want to transfer your notes into the story tab, because what will happen is there's not an option to export the notes. So if you create your module and just run out of the notes, it's no problem if it's going to be a one-time thing. But if you actually want to keep that work that you've done and be able to save it later on as a module, you're going to have to do the transferring of all your notes to a story tab. So try to get in the habit of using the story tab more than the notes. The notes are basically what that is. I mean, it's an easy functional thing that you can use for, for a game session. But if you really want a permanent fixture to your game and actually have this saved and exported, Fantasy Grounds will not export those notes unless they are in the story entry. So that's just a word of advice from me. I actually did that. I set up a campaign, I ran everything out of the notes, I exported it. I even went as far as deleting the work that I had done because I figured I'm all done. I don't need that campaign folder anymore. Lo and behold, lost all the work.
So I opened these up as he was explaining that. So what module export window, for those of you that have never seen that before, that's if you want to save your campaign. And how I got that was I typed /export in the chat window, and it brings this up. And you name your module. You can give it a little thumbnail picture if you want. You can put the category. You can say your author's name, and then you go down and you save all the things that you want to save in that module. And you'll see here backgrounds, classes, effects, so on and so on. That story is part of it, and story templates. Which is why you want to always put your information in stories. If you put it in notes, all that is a note, and it's not going to do you any good because, as you will see, and as Leroon said already, there is no notes. You can't export notes. So any notes that you put in a campaign, you can't save those. Those are only going to be in the table when you load up this particular campaign, and only those notes will apply to it. So you definitely want to create all your stuff in the story entries rather than notes. Good times.
All right.
All right. Map best practices. I know we're all going to have something to say about this. So, nothing really we can show within Fantasy Grounds, but just best practices for maps. If you're creating maps, if you're using Campaign Cartographer or GIMP or Photoshop or Paint or any of the other 9,000 programs I could name off right now that you're making maps with, 50 pixels per 5 feet on the map is a good rule. It's not a hard rule, but it's a good rule. If you're doing pictures in Fantasy Grounds, graphics of any kind, then, well, maybe I should open some. Whoops. If you're doing graphics of any kind, you want those graphics to have a maximum height of 700 pixels and a maximum width of 1000. And that's just a standard for those of us that are on the development team. They make us do all pictures no more than 1000 across or 700 high, just so that when they open it, if anybody's got their screen on the normal resolution, it'll open and it won't go outside the screen parameters. So I'll bet you this one right here is 700 high, because that's the furthest it should be. Now for maps, that's a different story. If it's a DM map, my personal preference is that you still use those parameters, 700 high and 1000 wide as maximums. But the maps themselves, which a lot of times you'll see are huge, like 6,000 by whatever. But for Fantasy Grounds, you're better off if you confine your parameters to no more than 2048 pixels on the X or the Y axis. So height or width, no more than 2048 on each of those. And again, that's doesn't mean it won't work if they're bigger than that, but it's just a best practice to have it be confined to those. Did you guys want to say anything about that?
I'm just going to say we do teach a little bit about that in the DMs class. I don't get too deep into it, but I do get into like how to size things, especially if you're using maps that you purchased. They're usually pretty huge.
Yeah, and we're not going to get into it too deep here because we are going to have a maps class on March 18th. Or not a class, but a maps. This show on Sunday the 18th of March will be about maps, and our special guest that day will be Chris McDermott from Game Tile Warehouse. So he knows all about maps. So that'll be good.
All right.
Well, there's also that because I know as a player when my DM like pulls up a map and is like, oh god, it's so big, I would actually just move either one of the bars into a reasonable size, and then if you right click and it's fit to horizontal or fit to vertical, it actually helps shrink down the map so you're not like, oh, where are my edges?
Right. So yeah, so you can if I hold control and move left click my mouse and move it, I can resize the window, and I like to kind of have my map be on part of the screen. But yeah, you can right click, get this radio menu and choose resize, and then what Fury is talking about is you can either adjust it horizontally or vertically. So it'll make the whole map conform to either the bottom or the side.
Right.
But we'll definitely go over that. That's a cool map. I don't think I've ever seen that. What the hell is city map? I want to play in there. What is that? I just pulled up a random. But yeah, so we'll in the maps thing we'll go over, and Leroon at Fantasy Grounds College they teach map classes, so they go over all that stuff in there. Okay, great. I think we're getting down to the nitty gritty here.
Getting close.
Fantasy Grounds educate. Etiquette is to discuss rules and questions. Oh, this is something that Fury mentioned to us before the show. Fury, do you want to cover that about rules and questions?
Yeah. Okay. So you get to a point in the game, you roll something, and you're like, okay, this is going to happen. However, there's, oh gosh, okay, we're talking about like mage armor and shield. So, our little magic user used mage armor, and then the reaction they wanted to use shield. And of course, the question is, do they stack? This is before, a big discussion happened and somebody ruled that they finally do stack. But, we spent a good 15, maybe 20 minutes of playtime, game session, arguing about, or, some of the players argued about, with the DM, whether or not this stacks. And it's like, guys, can we just say, okay, we can table this discussion until, after the game, and that way we can look it up instead of, the rest of us who are playing and it's like, 2 a.m. I would like to at least get through the segment so I can sleep a little bit before I have to go to work. It's just a really etiquette thing. If your DM is saying it doesn't stack right now, but I will look at it later, that's really cool. But if you're going to have one of those players or even the DM arguing about it, it's just going to really turn off the other players. And it's like, you know what? I don't want to be part of this game. That's just going to be conflict and arguing instead of, I got a story quest, I got to find some magical mushrooms and get my money.
Yeah, so the best way to handle that, if you're not sure, is most games will have that rule. They'll even say that, like during session 0, they'll say, "Hey, if anything comes up while we're playing, and we're all just really not sure what the answer is, we won't waste time. Everybody get out your player's handbooks at home and crack them open, or try to hunt through the reference manual to find the answer. The DM will just make a decision. We'll move on. We'll keep the game running. We'll have some fun. And at the end of the night, we'll go and we'll figure out, was that the way to do it, or do we need to do it a different way in the future? That's just really the best way to do it.
Mhm.
And I mean, I think that's part of the whole rule set at the very beginning, that all these rules are subject to change according to the DM's preference.
That's right.
That's right.
Uh, oh, go
One
ahead,
thing
Levern.
I wanted to add to that is very similar is store transactions. So instead of spending 3 hours trading and buying stuff, create a outside of the game, create a time where you guys can buy and sell and trade, so you're not interrupting the game itself.
Yeah, that's a group preference. Like a lot of my
Mhm.
games, some of the funnest parts we do are where we say, okay, let's go shopping. And we
Right.
spend 45 minutes just going through the items and stuff. I mean, a lot of players like that. But yeah, that would be a personal preference, what you guys want to
Right.
decide. Sometimes GMs will say, email me between sessions what you want. You can have one magic item, or you can spend your gold, and here are your restrictions or whatever. And sometimes you like to do that during the game. So, because I remember a big part of even playing the game when I was a young kid, way back a long time ago, like in the 17th century or whenever it was. I'm super old, but we part of the fun for me was we would actually break out the item lists and scour it and go, okay, I got 14 gold. What am I going to buy? Stuff like that.
And then you
Right.
can try to haggle, or
Yeah,
if you're a shifty little gnome character, try to steal shit. And then all of a sudden you get to the next session. Where's our gnome wizard? Oh, he got thrown in jail for stealing. What?
yeah,
Oh
and
no.
that's another thing is that if your game involves heavy role play, then you might also, you can't do it between sessions, because what if you're going to try to roll a charisma check or an intimidation thing to try to get the price down or stuff like that? You can't do that between sessions.
Okay.
So that's just a personal preference. Oh, Leveron, you mentioned this before the show about DMs going through the modules first and testing things.
Yep.
You want to
Fury
speak
did
about?
too.
Oh yeah, okay. You guys want to talk about that? What you mean by that?
Sure. So on a DM side of things, I kind of do a little of both. I'll skim through the book, and I'll look at some of the encounters and stuff, so I have an idea what I'm working with. But quite often I won't, and sometimes situations will come up that I don't know how to handle, or I'll have a little flub or something, or I'll miss something major. But for the most part, it's kind of a preference thing. But as a player, I think Fury has another perspective on it.
So, actually, I did DM like a module one time, and I didn't read it beforehand. So it's actually a little bit of both. So I'm playing the campaign with some friends, and we're going through it, and I have like nothing put together. I'm like, oh, I should have had these tokens ready, or oh, I should have had this map drawn out, or something for my players, or had a better visual of how um, you know the the ambush is going to go. So, they're playing, and I'm just like, okay, it's going to happen here, it's going to happen here. And I'm just trying to figure out, you know, for story cohesion and to make it interesting for my players. It's one of those things like I'm so lost at this, and I feel an awful, awful, burden of trying to be a DM. It's like, this is my first time DMing, and they don't ask me to ever do it again.
Well,
It's like,
so yeah, so I can. So my advice to people, if they're DMing, is it's a cross between you want to prepare, you want to read the module that you're going to run so that you know what it's about. But also, I like to follow the advice of the rules guy at Wizards of the Coast, Jeremy Crawford. And he's the guy that does Sage Advice and all that stuff on the internet. And his advice is prepare, but don't over prepare, and err on the side of under preparing. And the reason he says that, and the reason I found that to be a good thing, is um, players are always going to do what you don't want them to do. Like if the path is A to B to C, they're going to go A, and then they're going to go to X and Z, then they're going to go to a different plane. Like they're never going to follow what you want them to. So you kind of have to be ready for anything anyway. So preparing too much can really be kind of a waste of time. but you want to prepare. But having said all that, I must then say that the less you prepare, the more you have to know what you're doing. So if you're a DM and it's your first time DMing, you do not want to try to improvise too much. You want to kind of have everything, known what you're going to do. Now, if you've been DMing for, say, for example, 10 years or something like that, then all you probably need to do is, before your session, read the next few encounters, and as long as you know the story of what's happening, you can get away with it. Because I've run, ever since I've started with Fantasy Grounds, I've run Curse of Strahd, I've run Princes of the Apocalypse, and I'm running one of the modules of White Plume Mountain. I ran that, and I've done a couple other ones as well. And if I would have just completely memorized the whole thing and read it all in advance and had everything all ready to go in my head, it would have just been a complete waste of time. So I don't want to confuse people, but what I'm saying is prepare, but don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And,
Oh, well, I mean, for some of the things like story elements or like for the characters, when you're trying to portray who the character is, the NPCs, try to at least read through that NPC person's description and figure out, okay, this person's an elf cleric. Okay, cool. But she's also a harper. I'm like, oh, okay. So maybe this is the way you want to portray that character or that NPC. Maybe the players could utilize or be able to figure out that she's a harper and try to contact the harpers.
yeah, absolutely. And it seems to me, I'm glad you mentioned that. It seems to me that the more your game leans toward role playing, the more you have to prepare. Because if your characters are going to if your party's going to run into NPCs that have backstories and rich backgrounds and full life stories, and you want to become these people, and maybe even if you're going to do voices and different stuff like that, you need to know as much information as you can, so that you can, whether you're using tips that they write in these books that they write out for you, or whether you make it up your own self, you at least need to know who these people are.
True. Yes.
Yeah.
The other thing is, the encounters. Maybe sort of play test before you throw your players in there. See how, or if you know ahead of time, okay, what's my party made out of? What should I be worried about? They're going to run into problems because you don't exactly want to kill your players at the first encounter with,
You
dire
don't?
rats.
Damn it.
No, you don't. You do want to make it challenging, but you don't want to kill them because then they'll be discouraged and then they won't play with you again.
Right. All right, good. So, let's do a little giveaway here, and then we have one more tip, but we will do the last tip. I'll show what this giveaway thing is, and then we'll, while we're running the countdown, explain it a little bit, and then we'll do our last tip, and then I think we'll be done. And if anybody has questions, we'll, of course, get to those as well. So let me start the raffle, and then I will explain what it is. This is the very first thing I ever made in January of 2016 for Fantasy Grounds and or for the DM's Guild. Very first thing I ever put together, and it's a player ad, and not a player ad, but a player aid is what I meant to say. So let me get this going. I think keyword start. Okay, so the keyword, it didn't. Oh no, it didn't work. Damn it! Hold on. There we go. Keyword raffle opened. All users type exclamation races. So now this is called the D&D 5e race ability modifiers and key class stats. And what this is it's a list of every WotC race, all 29 or however many there are. And it's just a little simple tool. So when you're building a character and you want to know what the ability modifiers are, so say you're going to do standard array 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, 8, but you want to know, well, if I'm a dwarf, what does he get? He gets 1 on his strength and 2 on his constitution if he's a hill dwarf. So this lists all the races, and it's got everything. It's got Tortle, it's got everything from Xanathar's, and I update these. So whenever WotC puts out a new set of information, I always add. And if you already have the module, there's no upgrade cost or anything. You just get it for free if you already have it. And so rather than flipping through your player's handbook, or even worse, going on Fantasy Grounds and looking up each class and trying to decide, well, what, who gets what to charisma, and it's all just right here. Everything is just right here on the screen. So you can actually look at any race, and if you're power building a character, or if you're doing something like that and you really want to max it out, and you're like, well, I want to have the most strength I can have, so I can put a 15 in my strength, and then who's got most on strength? Well, look, all these people have 2: Bugbear, Dragonborn, Dwarf. That's just kind of a little a thing that you can do to kind of give yourself a quick glance as you're building a character.
That's awesome. I actually started using this in my curriculum for character creation.
Oh, nice.
So
Yeah,
not
and
everyone has access to those books, so this is helpful for that too.
most of the stuff that I built early on, and even up through all of the coding, I always say this, everything I've ever built is more than likely born out of frustration. When I was sitting here like, oh man, why can't I just have a list of all the, well, fuck it, I'll make it. I'll just make it. And so most of the stuff I've ever made is these kind of tools that I needed for myself, and then I thought, well, I bet everybody else would like it too. So good. So let's see, are people joining? Nobody is joining the thing. Did it even work? Somebody type in the chat maybe. Oh, there we go. I mean, yeah, maybe I had that thing shut off. So guys, if you were trying to join that and it wasn't working, sorry about that. I think I had the countdown paused, but it seems that Twilight Dream is in, so it is working. So if you want to get a free copy of that thing I just showed, just type exclamation races in the chat. Meanwhile, we'll go over our last tip. Do we have any questions from the chat, you guys?
Bruno asked if we're going to have these videos archived because he's not a subscriber. So he's kind of concerned that he wants to know how he can go back and watch these later.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I do have my Twitch set on subscriber only, and a lot of people ask me about that. I'm not doing it to try to make money or anything like that. I'm doing it to encourage people to go to YouTube and watch the videos. So yes, everything and our first 2 shows are already on YouTube. For those of you that don't know, on my YouTube channel, I have about 500 videos. About 510 or 500, more than 500 anyway. There's my YouTube link in there. So yeah,
Awesome.
this show and the first 2 shows we did, and basically everything I've ever streamed. The only thing that I stream that I don't put on YouTube is module creation. Sometimes
Right.
I'll do module creations, but I will not put those on YouTube. And I don't know. I just don't think they have a place there. But plus, there might be something I'm streaming that I don't want people to see unless they see it when I'm doing it.
Or if
Stuff
they
like
buy
that.
the module.
Or if they buy them, yeah. Well, anything that you're streaming, you're not. I mean, if people want to look at the information and try to piece it together themselves, God bless them. So the last tip we had is utilizing pointers instead of drawing, which we'll cover more in depth when we do the map show. But just a little quick thing. So there is a drawing mode. If you right-click on any map or picture and choose drawing, and then choose enter drawing mode, you can draw on here a little black, you basically can just, and it's so bad, nobody ever uses this, but you can do it. And this is where 14-year-olds get a hold of it, and then they draw penises, and everybody does it. So that's one way you can make something on a map. But in a year and a half, neither I nor my players have ever used the drawing mode. And I think I can erase it here. Clear drawing. Okay, so what we do use, let me get out of drawing mode. What we do use are pointers. Exit drawing mode. There we go. So on the map, you can do right click. You can do choose pointers. And there are 4 types of pointers: an arrow or a line with an arrow on it, a square, a circle, and a cone. So if you do these, if you click on these, you can, whatever you clicked on, then you can just do it. You can draw it. If I go and click on a square, I can draw a square like that. and it gets away from you if you don't know. But you can also do quick drawings. So let me clear these. So by just holding both mouse keys and dragging, you can make a line with an arrow. And it'll, wherever you want to start it, wherever you end up is where the arrow will be. And if you do a quick drawing, when you double click your mouse, not double click, but hold both left and right together, it'll disappear. So it's a quick way you can do a bunch of arrows one at a time. If you want to draw an arrow on the map and you want it to not disappear, then you have to use the permanent drawing like that. So now that one won't disappear. I can draw all kinds of other stuff on here, but that arrow that's there won't disappear. So go ahead.
Oh, if we have different colored dice, the color of that will correspond to your dice color.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I change whatever your dice color is, and whatever you have is what color the pointers are going to be for you. That's how you can distinguish players apart in the DM.
Yeah,
Nice.
which is really good, especially if someone's casting an area of effect and another person has a different area effect.
Right.
Like someone's casting light and the other one's going to say, oh, well, I'm going to also do a fireball. So.
Right. So another do would be to have all the players have different color dice, so that everybody can tell each other apart. Oh my God. Okay, I think we have all the entries in for the, and I'll do some more about the pointers in just a second. But let's give away the prize. I'm going to draw a winner here. So congratulations to Twilight Dream. You won the prize. Excellent. So Twilight, just PM me in Discord. I'll put the Discord link in the chat. So just send me a PM in Discord, and I will make sure and get you your prize. And we're going to try and give away a prize, at least one prize on the show every week. And I know that when Stooner comes back to co-host, he's giving away a buttload of prizes, like over hundreds of dollars worth of prizes.
Wow.
That's nice.
Yeah. So the other shapes you can do are square. If you hold Shift and then hold left and right mouse buttons, you can drag a square. If you hold Control, you can do a circle, and if you hold Alt, then you can do a cone. And again, those are all quick draws, and then you can still go and make them permanent if you want to do that. So now when I do quick draws, that won't come off. So
cool.
So that's it. So those are the best ways to show somebody something on a map, even if you're doing a spell that has a cone or a circle or square area of effect. But even if you just say, hey, meet me, my character wants to meet you. I want to meet you in this corner. You can go like that. And then you can clear them all off. Oh, look, my dice are still white. How horrible. There we go. All right. If there's any questions, feel free to post them in the chat, and as we wrap up, we will answer those questions. What about you two, Leyroon and Furied Fate? Do you guys have any questions?
Not really. I really like the. I did actually learn a couple things during this, and I did not know about the quick draw, and so I think I'm going to include some sort of criteria to where we teach the shortcut keys for Fantasy Grounds.
Yeah, cool. Excellent. Yeah, I always, even though I'm doing a show about like how to use Fantasy Grounds, I learn stuff every day, and I mean I've read the entire 157 page PDF manual, and I still learn stuff. So, which by the way, if you want to read the manual, you can go to the setup and click on user manual, and it'll take you to the user manual, which is 157 pages.
Wow.
But it's pretty intense. It covers, I guess, everything there is to know, and stuff that I say I always learn something every day. Probably what I learned is in here. I either just forgot it or it didn't internalize it when I read it, because it's a pretty hefty read. But it's got
robust.
Yeah, if you look through it, it's got all the pictures of everything, how the maps work, what does the combat tracker do, blah. I mean, it's just loaded down. It's got everything in there. I'm just flying through it like there's no tomorrow.
So most of that stuff is on the wiki, right?
Most of the stuff's on the wiki. Yeah, it's better presented in the. I think it's better presented in the user manual, and I'm not sure, but table of contents.
Is it
Oh yeah,
searchable?
table. Yeah, it's searchable and it's also dynamically linked. So if you're in
Nice.
the table of contents and you're like, oh, calendar, what is that about? Click on calendar, bam, you're right there.
That's very
Oh, no.
helpful.
Yeah, so it's
That
pretty
is.
cool. And that again can be reached if you don't know the URL. You can just go to. You can open up your options, and when you have options open from the gear here, you can click on setup, and it's the first thing, user manual. Just click on that, and it'll take you right there.
Just download it on my little e-reader and just read it on my spare time.
Right? Because
Yeah.
that's what you need to be doing is reading a 150-page manual of Fantasy Grounds in your spare time.
Of course.
All right, so if we have no other questions, I think we did pretty good. We went an hour and 15 minutes. That's about what I thought it would be.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. I'd like to thank Fury Fate for being our special guest this evening.
Thank you.
And
Thank you for inviting
are we
me.
going to see you back for sure? Did we lock you in on the
Yes,
25th?
yes.
Okay,
You
cool.
locked me on the 25th.
All right.
Nice.
Guest confirmed. Oh, I better. Oh, I'm going to highlight that. Just look. Guest host confirmed. Excellent. So we'll be back on Tuesday, just a short 2 days. Leroon and I will be back here with Farid to talk about inspiration. I don't
And
imagine.
the uses of it.
And the uses of it in Fantasy Grounds. How to mechanically use it and what to use it for in your games, because it doesn't get used enough as far as I'm concerned. So, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I see. We're gonna have to talk about role playing, Rob.
Oh my
Unfortunately.
God. Well, maybe I'll let you take the lead then, because I don't need to be talking about that. I actually do give inspiration for like cool ideas that players come up with and stuff. I do that.
Right.
So let me.
So, any questions in the chat before we call it a day or a night? All right. So, I want you guys to support our streamers, particularly Rob Tui, GeoQuester, all the pertinent people that cross promote us. Also, Fantasy Grounds College. We do things occasionally on there. I just want to thank everyone for coming and for joining this chat.
Excellent. Fury, any final words?
No. Thank you for having me here. I will be playing Possibly Dying in GeoQuester's game, not this Wednesday, but next Wednesday. So I'm excited to see what happens there. I might need to watch the Inspiration podcast. Hopefully that would save my ass.
Celestian says
Rob for president. I love it.
Thanks, Celestian.
All right,
That's
guys.
funny.
Thanks for hosting the show with me tonight, and we'll see you guys later.
Later.
All right, and for those of you that are watching the stream, that was Leroon, and that was Fury Fate with me for tonight. I'd like to thank all the people that were watching tonight for showing up, and hopefully we got you some more information. This video, of course, will be on YouTube. Even though it's not a game, I am giving out end of stream rewards. So let's do it because that's how I do. If I can reorganize the list and get it alphabetical so that I can find the command. Bam, there it is. So also I'm going to put in the chat here just the ways that you can support the channel. As soon as I turn it on. Why does that get disabled every time? That's so weird. So there you go, guys. You can come to our Discord. You can go to my Patreon. We have Patreon levels for as little as $1. You can subscribe to the channel if you wish. You can do that for as little as $1. No. Sorry, Patreon's $1. Subscribe, though, you can do for free. If you have Amazon Prime, you can subscribe to the channel for free. Otherwise, you can do it the regular way. There's, I think, $4.99, $9.99, $24.99. All depends on what level of support you'd like to give. You can also donate to the channel if you wish. You can go to the DMs Guild and peruse the items over there. I'll check the current sales for the DMs Guild. Today, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 items sold on the DMs Guild today.
I love you, man.
There's a sub right there from Fat Ninja DM. Thanks, man. Thanks, Fat Ninja, for the sub. Appreciate that. You can also go to YouTube where these videos will be, and you can subscribe to my YouTube. YouTube is being bitches.